Welcome to Sakshi TV Special Immigration Talk Show with attorney Mr. Chan Parvathaneni, a managing attorney from Sim Parvathaneni and Ron. Please note that Sakshi TV now has 4 immigration shows every week. On Tuesdays with lawyer Srinivas Kaveti, on Wednesdays with Ms. Prashanti Reddy in English, on Thursdays with Mr. Chan Parvathaneni, and on Fridays with Banu and Indra. Please tune in to ask your questions. If you are an immigration attorney and would like to join our special shows, please email us at usa@sakshi.com or call us at 866-725-7441. Before we begin the show, please note that the information provided on the show is not a legal advice and for general informational purposes only. Sakshi TV or its agents will not be responsible for the use of information. Mr. Chan needs no introduction, but if you need consultation, please don't forget to log in to sbblawfirm.com site for contact information. SBB Law Firm site has put a wealth of free information and online tools in the hands of immigrant community that you do not have to be a lawyer to understand. If you need direct consultation, you can definitely contact the attorney directly. Don't forget to mention Sakshi TV. Mr. Chan Parvathaneni, welcome back to our show. I hope you're doing well.
Thank you, Shivani, and thank you all Sakshi TV viewers for joining in today. Hopefully, we'll have another informative session on US immigration today.
Yes. So, Mr. Parvathaneni, we thought today we'll discuss a little about the recession, the layoffs, and also the current stamping issues of the H1Bs. So, before we get into the topic, can you tell us what are some recent USCIS updates that we have?
So a major update, major news that came out recently is regarding the fee increase. So from 2016, we did not see a fees increase for the visa applications. And recently, Department of Homeland Security, they have published a proposal. And right now it is in comment period. And what that means is once the comment period is over, more than likely, we will see USCIS increasing the fees for a lot of applications. So applications like the H1B, the H4 application, the green cards, the I-140s. So all of them are probably going to see a rate hike in the near future. And more than likely, we will see that price increase in 2023. And right now it's a proposal. It's going through the comment period, but that is something what we will see more down the line.
Yes. So, Mr. Chan Parvathaneni, what exactly is the stamping situation of the H1Bs here in India? And are people able to get easy dates for the H1Bs this time?
So last year, this time, it was a great challenge to find dates for H1B visa stampings at the Indian consulates. And the consulates were in a disarray. They were not releasing slots, and it was very, very hard to get the stamping dates. However, it looks like the consulates have really worked on it. And since last November, the US Department of State, they have been releasing a lot of slots, and periodically they have been releasing a lot of slots. And what that means is people are now able to get the visa slots, and it has made a lot of people make plans for visa stamping. However, one needs to constantly monitor the website because the dates, they're getting over as soon as they're opened up, and the dates are being opened up in bulk. So people, as long as they're monitoring the website, more than likely within a month they should be able to get a stamping date. And the good thing is we still have Dropbox, and what that means is somebody can get a Dropbox appointment in, say, Delhi, but if they're living in Hyderabad, they can drop their documents at the consulate in Hyderabad. So this whole Dropbox process has made things a lot more smoother. And the Dropbox feature was originally only till December 31st, 2022. But however, the Department of State recently extended that to December 2023. So throughout 2023, we will still have Dropbox. And what Dropbox basically is it's an interview waiver. People don't have to go for an interview if they satisfy certain conditions. And many people who have received any kind of a visa in the past, they're able to just use the Dropbox facility, skip the whole interview process, and get the visa stamping. So right now, things are smooth, and at least until December 31st, 2023, we can anticipate to have Dropbox, and slots are being available. So things are a little bit smoother than what they were a few months back. But again, this is only for H1Bs. The tourist visas, B1, B2, they are still struggling. The slots are not open. So those are still in a bad shape. The H1s, however, things are a little bit smoother than what they were last year.
Yes. So what's up with the situation for the 221Gs, Mr. Chand? Like, are they being easily published, or are they being easily issued, especially here in India?
So 221G, it's something that everybody dreads. It's not something anybody is looking for, because 221G basically means that the visa application has been temporarily refused, and the consular officer wants more information, maybe more documents, or maybe needs to do a background check. So they're saying they're going to temporarily refuse the visa. And in general, what normally happens is for the H1B, there is an approval that needs to happen on the US side. So on the US side, the body is USCIS, United States Citizenship and Immigration Services. So they have to approve the case. However, even if USCIS approves the case in US, at the consulate, the consular officers, they don't have to approve the visa. And normally what happens every year is majority of the people will get approvals easily. But then there are also a lot of people who get stuck with a 221G, with a temporary refusal. And this happens all the time. And so what we are currently seeing is, in spite of having Dropbox, some people are still getting called for an interview, or some people, even without getting called for an interview, are getting issued this 221G notice. And when people get a 221G, there are two types. One, there is a document request. So the 221G will say, these are the documents that we require to process your visa. That is of one kind. And the other kind is a blanket 221G, where nothing is required. And it will simply state that they have to do their background checks, and then they will issue the visa. So they're not really asking for any documents. It's kind of a vague 221G. And what that means is we are just at the mercy of the consulate to finish their background checks. And a lot of visa slots got opened up in November. And since November, what we are seeing is, because a lot of slots got opened up, there is a lot of work for the consular officers, because now more and more people are going for the visa, either Dropbox or interviews. So what that also means is the 221Gs, in terms of numbers, have probably gone up, but in terms of percentage, it's probably still the same as what we normally see. However, the timelines. So once somebody gets a 221G, it's a temporary refusal. So now somebody is waiting for the consulate to finish the process and issue them a visa. Previously, historically, a month, maybe 2 months is what it used to take for majority of the cases. But recently, probably due to lack of bandwidth, lack of enough staff at the consulate, or probably due to the holiday season that just passed last month, things are definitely slow. So, however, there is nothing you can do to speed up the process. But if you get a document request, make sure you respond to the document request right away. And then after a month, keep contacting the consulate every few days. I would say every week, to see if there is an update. And other than that, there is not really a good way to really force the consulate. But all we can hope for is the staffing levels are improved, and the staffing levels are at a point where they can handle the 221Gs a little bit more faster. But at this point of time, people who are able to get dates should go for stamping. And a lot of people, majority of the people are able to get the H1B issued without a 221G.
Great. Now, Mr. Chan, let's get on to the third country national visa stamping situation. So, how is it happening? And can people travel? Can the employees especially travel to Mexico or Canada, as it's very close to USA? So, how is the situation there about that here in India?
So, third country nationals, or TCNs, what it means is they're not ordinarily residents of that country, but they're going for stamping in that country. So that's why they're called third country nationals. So if somebody, say an Indian national working in US, they want to go for stamping in Mexico or Canada, even though they're not residents of Mexico or Canada, they're third country nationals. The US consulates in Mexico and Canada, they are currently allowing the third country nationals, the TCNs, for H1B stamping. And in general, it's really a good thing because historically, Mexico consulates or the Canada consulates, they're a little bit more faster than the Indian consulates in general. And that's probably because the Indian consulates have a lot more load compared to Mexico or Canada for H1Bs. So in general, if at all it is possible, a lot of people do look for Mexico or Canada as an option to get their visa stampings. The main rule is that they should not have overstayed their I-94. They should not be out of status in US. So as long as somebody has not overstayed, they are maintaining their status, they are generally eligible for TCN processing. And what that means is they can go to Mexico, they can go to Canada for visa stamping. However, before they go, they have to make appointments, and there is a US Info website that's available for Mexico and Canada, and they have to go to the website and book an appointment. And the only issue is it's easy to enter Mexico, but to enter Canada, they require a separate Canadian tourist visa. So people really have to apply for a Canadian visa, but it's not difficult. But because of COVID situation, timelines have been a little bit longer. But in general, if anybody has a Canadian visa, Canada is a good option to explore to get the H1B visa issued. And also, Canada issues all kinds of H1B visas for extensions, for amendments, even for change of status. Mexico, on the other hand, they issue H1 visas for extensions and amendments for third country nationals. But if it is for a change of status H1, somebody from F1 to H1, Mexico typically does not issue the first time H1 visas. So Mexico probably is not an option if somebody is trying to go to Mexico for the first time, change of status to H1 visa stamping. So that's something people have to be aware when they try to go to Mexico. But if not, in general, Canada and Mexico are very, very good options. And that's something what people should explore, mainly because it is so close to US. And in terms of scheduling, it's a lot more easier than going all the way to India and going for stamping.
Yes. So, Mr. Chand, what exactly is automatic visa revalidation? Is it true that people can travel to Mexico or Canada without a visa and come back to extend their I-94?
Sure. So in general, the normal view is that anytime somebody leaves the country and tries to get back into US, they always need to have an active US visa. So normally it's a given that if the US visa is expired, you cannot really come back into US. However, there is one exception, and that is automatic visa revalidation. And what automatic visa revalidation does is it allows foreign nationals to enter United States after a brief visit to Canada or Mexico, even if the visa is expired. So somebody can have an expired visa, travel from US to Canada or travel from US to Mexico, and they can come back even if the visa is expired. However, there are some rules. The main rule is that the travel from US to Canada or US to Mexico, it cannot exceed more than 30 days. So somebody can leave US, go to Mexico or go to Canada, but they should be coming back within 30 days. That's the first rule. The second rule is they should not have applied for a visa. They should not have been refused a visa. If that holds, they can return back to US even with the expired visa. So even if their H1 visa has expired sometime back, they can still come back into US. So it's a great feature because normally we assume that an active visa is required. But it's a great visa because people can go on a vacation to Mexico, or people can go on a vacation to Canada or meet their friends or any family that's in Canada, and don't have to worry about stamping. So even with an expired visa, they can just come back. So it's a great option. And what normally happens is when they re-enter US, even if they have an expired visa, as long as they have a valid approval, they can show that approval. And when they come back into the country, they get a proper I-94 that reflects their approval on their 797. So this option is used by a lot of people to travel to Mexico or Canada. One thing to note is that this option is only for Mexico and Canada in general, and not to any other non-contiguous countries. So people cannot go to other countries. So if they leave for other countries, they definitely need to have an active visa.
Yes. So, Mr. Chand, I know this is a common question, but what actually happens to people who lose their jobs, especially when they are on H1Bs? And how exactly does the USCIS know that, the employees have lost their jobs?
Yeah, unfortunately, layoffs have started happening in tech sector, and we're seeing a lot of tech layoffs. The good news is that people are still being able to find a job pretty quickly after a layoff. But there are some regulations, so people should know what those rules are. So from 1990 to 2017, there was no grace period. So if somebody lost their job, the very next day they have to leave the country. So there was absolutely no grace period. But starting 2017, luckily, new regulations came into effect. And what those mean is that now they have a 60-day grace period. So somebody loses their job. They have 60 days after their end of employment to find a new employer. So they can stay back in the country, be without a job, try to find a new employer. So they have 2 months of time to find a new employer. And what that means is the clock starts the day they lose their job. So they have to quickly start looking for a new job. And as long as they find a new job, as long as the new employer files a new H1B, they can stay back in the country. So, that's a very, very important facility for people who are laid off. And that really helps families because when a H1B employee is laid off, they have a spouse, they have a child who's going to school, and so many things. So it is not really easy to just leave everything and go out of the country. So USCIS, by giving this feature, the 60-day feature, they're trying to make sure that people get enough time to find a job. And in general, most of the people are able to find a job within 60 days.
Yes. So, Mr. Chan, let's say that somebody has lost their jobs and we're not able to or get a job in 60 days because that's the notice period. But what happens if they get a job after 60 days of time period? Is there any complications that they have to go through, especially with the H1Bs?
Right. So the general rule is one only has 60 days to find a new job. So in case they have some new employer who files a new petition within 60 days, they are good. However, in case they do not find any employer within 60 days and the employer files a petition after 60 days, what generally happens is USCIS, they will not grant the status request. They will still approve the H1. But there is something called extension of status. And along with the H1, the extension of status also needs to be approved for somebody to stay in the country. So in general, if the 60-day period is not met and there is a late filing, the H1B will be approved. But what USCIS will say is they will basically say council processing. So somebody has to leave the country, go for visa stamping, and then come back using that approval. So normally what happens is people try to avoid this. People try to avoid this by filing for a bridge change of status petition, if at all it's possible, depending on the situation, and try to maintain some other status. So as long as they're able to maintain some other status, even if 60 days cross, they might be able to stay back in the country. But depending on the situation, how it is done, if they are out of status for more than 60 days, the general rule is they have to return back. They have to get a new visa, H1B visa, and then re-enter the country.
Yes. So, Mr. Chan, what will actually happen if the same employee is going to, rehire the employer and, terminate the H1Bs? So, is that possible if the same employee wants to hire the employer within the 60 days, if they want to hire it within 60 days or after 60 days, what are the different complications that they might have to go through?
Sure. So normally what happens is, say someone gets laid off. So when somebody gets laid off, the employer does not have any liability to pay the employee. However, sometimes it does happen. The employer gets a new project or a new assignment, and they decide to hire the same employee who got terminated back on their payroll. So it is still possible. So the same employer can still hire the new the same employee once again. The only rule is that they have to do it before 60 days, and they also have to file a new petition, because if they have already revoked the H1, they have to go back to USCIS. They have to file a new petition, and again they can start employment of their employee. So the summary is that yes, the same employer who terminates an employee can do a rehire and hire the same employee back again. The only thing to remember is do it within 60 days, file a new petition with USCIS.
Yes. So, Mr. Chand Parvathaneni, a lot of employees, what they do is they are paid with a severance fee, and that can last up to few months. And during this period, what happens is you also get the 60 days of the time period. So, when will the 60 days of the time period start? Will that start the moment they lose their job, or will it start the moment they get their last paycheck?
Right. So many companies, what happens is during a layoff, they do offer severance. So severance is something like, okay, we terminate you on so and so day, but we will pay you for 1 month, 2 months, or 3 months, for example. So the severance package, what it means is people will still be able to get the paychecks, the payroll for a few months after their termination. So in general, because when you do a transfer filing, USCIS looks at the pay statements. So there is a misconception that USCIS looks at the payroll to find out when their last payroll is and calculate 60 days from that date. So it's a misconception. The USCIS rule is it's not about the paychecks. They don't care about people getting the paychecks. What they care about is what is the last date? What is the last day they stopped working? That is the day the 60-day clock starts. So if somebody is getting severance, they can get paid by that employer, but they still have a liability to look for a new job because the 60-day counter has started the day they stop working. So even if the previous company is still paying them, it doesn't matter. The day they stopped working, that is the day the clock starts ticking, and they're supposed to find a job within 60 days. Otherwise, USCIS will reject their transfer filing.
Yes. So, Mr. Chan, can you tell us, I'm pretty sure you've dealt with so many different people, but how does the layoff affect people who are, currently under one I-485 and are waiting for their green cards? Will that affect the people who are getting their green cards, and what are the complications related to that?
So if somebody has filed their I-485, they are pretty much in the last stage before they get their green card. So they've gone through a lot of process, probably spent a lot of years in US, and they're at their final stage. So losing a job during that stage, it's a little stressful. But if anybody has already filed for a I-485, what happens is they are in authorized status. So losing somebody's job during that status, it does not jeopardize their status. They will still remain in status until USCIS reviews their case and subsequently either approves 485 or denies 485. So normally what happens is when they file 485, they also file for employment authorization through EAD, through Form I-765, and also the travel permit, the advance parole. And this is very important because when somebody loses the job, having an EAD card will give them a lot of flexibility because EAD will allow them to work for any employer without requiring the employer to petition on their behalf. So what it means is the pool of employers is probably larger. It's probably a little bit more easier to get a job. So they can easily find a job. And what happens is when somebody is having a pending 485, they are still required to be employed in the same or similar job because there is an AC-21 requirement that they should still have a job in same or similar occupation, something that's similar. So to satisfy the AC-21 burden, it's very important that they find a job as soon as possible. But in terms of the clock ticking, at least they don't have to be worried about the 60-day clock, but they still have to look for a job. So tomorrow they do not run into any issues with the AC-21 job portability.
So, Mr. Chan, let's talk about the OPT students. How can these layoffs affect the OPT students?
So OPT students refer to those students who have probably finished their degree, their bachelor's degree or master's degree in US, and who have got the employment authorization. So these students, they typically what they do is they work on this thing called OPT status, and typically the sequences during their OPT, they find an employer who is also willing to sponsor their H1. And OPT employees getting laid off, it has a lot of consequences because number one, whenever somebody has got issued an OPT employment authorization, USCIS has strict limits on what they should be doing. According to USCIS, they should be working at least 20 hours a week in the field of study. That's very important. And if they have unemployment, if they get laid off, there are strict limits on how much max unemployment period they're allowed to accrue. So OPT initially it is for 1 year. So in the entire 1 year, according to USCIS, they can be unemployed only for 90 days. So anything more than 90 days, they have a problem. They have a status problem. And even during their future H1 application, that could come into play. So it is very important that they do not have more than 90 days of unemployment in their first year of OPT status. And after the initial OPT, they get 2 years of STEM OPT for STEM OPT graduates. And during those 2 years, so overall for their OPT period, they're allowed to have only 150 days of unemployment. So they cannot exceed more than 150 days. So it is very, very important that they're not employed for more than 150 days, because if they cross that period, they are not maintaining their status. So anytime there's a layoff for an OPT student, it is extremely important they find a new job as soon as possible. And when OPT students file their H1, it is a very common RFE where USCIS comes back and says, hey, did you have any unemployment through all the employment time periods? Even during stamping, sometimes this question comes up, and at the consulates, they verify the employment time periods for OPT students. So what this means is OPT students have to know the regulations. They are supposed to know how long they can be unemployed, and it is very important that they comply with the law.
Yes. Finally, Mr. Chan, now that there's recession happening, and I'm pretty sure you're dealing with so many different visa issues. Is there something that you want to finally say to the viewers watching, and just any personal things?
Sure. So I think unfortunately layoffs have started, but what is happening in US is people who are experienced, people who have the right skills, they're still finding jobs easily. And in our office, we have seen a lot of cases who have got laid off. They found a new job, and we are doing the transfers. So at least the tech job market as a whole, even though there are layoffs, people are still being able to find a job pretty easily. And the statistics out there are saying that in general, most of the people are able to find a job within 1 to 2 months. So hopefully, I think we will not see a recession, or even if we see a recession this year, it is going to be a mild recession. Most of the people, most of the economists are predicting a mild recession, not really a long-term recession. So if that is the case, more than likely people will be okay. And I think that's what we'll hope for. And what it means to all the tech employees in US is that they have to stay updated with their skill set. They have to make sure in case they lose their jobs, they know their time limits, how long they can stay in the country, and at all times comply with the law. And hopefully they'll be in good shape.
Yes. Thank you so much, Mr. Parvathaneni, for joining on to our show. Thank you for the viewers for tuning in. You're watching Sakshi TV with me, Shivani Raj.